in Baltimore before football begins. It is oh so close, and for many Orioles fans, it can't come quickly enough. This guy lives here in the Charm City. He's been doing the national thing these days for CBS Sports and the CBS Sports Network. He is a reporter and analyst, and this week, rumored, and now it's a fact, that he'll be doing preseason football along with Jerry Sandusky and Coach Billick at BAL, as well as on the Rave TV thing. We welcome Evan Washburn, one of our defending champions, back on to talk all things purple. What's going on, man? Happy summer to you and the family here in Baltimore.
I appreciate it, Nestor. Always good to talk to you. And, yeah, it feels like summer, obviously. It's about as thick as you can imagine here in Baltimore, but I can't wait for the season to get rolling, man. This July seems to be crawling along.
Well, I always like to talk about the 2 days of training camp. Those days are long gone, but certainly doing preseason games. You guys got the hardest job in the world. I'll talk to Billick about this. Billick didn't even know who the hell was on the team when he was coaching it because there's 120 guys, on both sides, and then the Buccaneers come in here or whatever, and you got to figure that out. I don't even know who the opponents are, but it is a lot of work for a little bit of appreciation doing preseason football games, right?
I think it's a great point. The one shift I would say, and way to think about it differently, and as a guy who's done a lot of different types of media, if you can get outside of what you think a normal game should sound like, be produced like, be called like, you can make the preseason game interesting, in my opinion. And I think you approach it like a TV show after the first quarter of those first 2 games, and then that third game you treat as much like a real game as you can, much like the players do, and then you make the fourth game a reality show about who's going to make the roster. I mean, I think there's ways to do the game differently that hopefully can be entertaining for folks and keep us sane doing it. If you go into it thinking we got to call every down like it's a regular season game, you'll drive yourself crazy by the second quarter of week 1.
Dude, I tried to do play-by-play one, and just trying to remember like 20 soccer jerseys. They had me out at Preakness for kicks a couple years ago. Remember they had the meet. I mean, you might have done it.
The way they called. Well, that's a whole other ballgame.
They had me call a horse race, and you know what? I didn't suck at it, but I thought I would. I always tell people I could learn to play the guitar. I could never play the piano, and people are like, you've been on the radio 30 years. I mean, you could do anything. No, I could not do play-by-play. It's just not what I do. You know what I mean? So I think there's a whole different deal to it, right?
Yeah, we all know our strengths, and I will say that being around some of the great ones, I'm with Iron Eagle every week during the regular season. I've done games with Jim Nance, Kevin Harlan in hoop season, and they're a different type of brain. I mean, much like anything else, everyone has sort of whether you're type A and things that you're drawn to, whether they be creatively, numbers, all those things. I believe to be one of the great play-by-play guys, you have to have a special kind of sort of way of retaining information, explaining information, and some people have it, some people don't. That doesn't mean don't try it, but to be great, I think you do have to have a gift to it.
Bro, there's only so much information I can take in at a time, right? I mean, I sit here, I talk baseball, football, basketball, golf this week, tennis, you're doing all that stuff. One thing that I have lost sight of, and I'm going to London this week to scout for our Raven-Jaguar game over. You called a game in London yet?
I have. 2 years ago, it would be 2 years ago, it was Dolphins-Jets, and it was unbelievable.
I remember that game.
I'll tell you, it was. And I wish it was my second year doing NFL sideline, so I was still very sort of focused on doing everything right, and I don't think I enjoyed what that environment and that experience is like as much as I should have. So I hope I go back, but it's unique, and you've heard how it is at Wembley. I think is that where the Ravens are going to play?
Ravens have Wembley. Yeah, they have Wembley.
Yeah, it's a unbelievable structure. London provides like so much for fans. I know players probably don't get as much time to enjoy it, but it's unique. And honestly, the people do love having the NFL there. I don't necessarily know what they think of it, but they treat it like a big event, which is cool to be a part of in week 4.
He is Evan Washburn. He will be calling football all year long at CBS, and you may remember him from the Comcast Sportsnet days. He's with CBS now. You can follow him at Evan Washburn, and he will be doing preseason football. This is what I was going to say. I'm caught up in the Jaguars, and I know our road trips, and we're going to Oakland, we're going to Nashville, and Minnesota. I got my flights, Green Bay, all that stuff together. One thing I didn't realize is this first preseason game's crucial. They're playing the Redskins. They better damn well win on August 10th. You know what I mean? It's the Redskins.
Well, it's funny. We talk talk about making the preseason interesting. I love that we have that. I feel like it's happened a couple times over the last few years, and it does. It provides something for at least fans, and it's something we can build up as we call the game. Look, you're desperate at this point in the year to have things to cling on to, and there's no doubt that that's something that those of us in this area will think about. I'm not sure how much it trickles into game planning or any of those things, but anytime it's against a team that's literally 30 miles down the road, it'll have a little extra meaning to it.
The Governor's Cup is what we need here. Look, for the season and really for the offseason, the losses, the comings, and the goings, I'm kind of happy with where the Ravens are. I mean, I don't think they're going to win 14 games this year. I really don't think they're going to win the Super Bowl this year, and I'm planning on being in Minnesota for my 27th Super Bowl this year and doing radio. But I don't see that as the end outcome for this year. But I do see the end outcome that is that if they are somehow 8-6 the week before Christmas, I think they can be a playoff team, and I think at that point they might be able to make some noise. But I don't see this as a lost cause at all, and I really like the late off-season additions and what they've done there. The Macklin thing is just classic Ozzie Newsome, and I think a lot of fans here are excited to see how this offense is going to go, and that's part of the preseason is who's going to be at guard, who's going to be at center, who's going to play right tackle. How are we going to do this, and how are they going to run the football, and then how does Joe Flacco stand in the middle of all of that, because this offense is a bit of a mystery right now as we begin training camp.
And it's fascinating. And I think for the first time in a long time, and I'll speak for myself, there seems to be an urgency of we have some past failures to look upon when associating the Ravens with what they have to do this year, if that makes sense. In years past, there's always been this sense, well, that was just a sort of a flash in the pan, maybe a down year, a bunch of injuries hit this team. Well, now those 4 seasons have stacked upon themselves. And now this team, much like many teams across the NFL, find themselves at a place where they have to now start proving people wrong, that all those successful runs, the Super Bowl is obvious, but just the consistent association with Baltimore in the playoffs, that's not something of a different era. And
Ray Lewis doesn't live here anymore, right? Literally,
right? But even beyond Ray, I mean, when Ray was gone, we were still living, whether it be off of him, but just really what those teams did. The consistency. Now, it's still associated with John Harbaugh and then in turn with Joe, but there is evidence now for those of us who break down this team, those of us that are fans of this team, people across the NFL to be like, what is Baltimore really at this point under Harbaugh, under Ozzie at this point in his career? And to me, that as a guy who makes a living trying to find things that are interesting to talk about and report and try and find out and analyze, that to me is fascinating for the team that, for a good reason, has been kind of boring in the sense that you kind of knew what you were going to get year in and year out there for 6 or 7 years straight, especially those first 8, I think, under John. So to me, that's what's most interesting.
Well, for a lot of these guys who've won Super Bowls now, for the Russell Wilsons, even for Roethlisberger, who's been in a couple now and won, there's the second act for Joe Flacco, right? I mean, he's got all the money. He's got the beautiful children and the wife. I mean, he's a Raven Hall of Famer. Maybe one day there'll be a statue for him outside. But all of that is still ahead of him is what is the second act here? What do the next 5 years look like for him when Tom Brady's running around doing this at 40 right now?
But, Nestor, here's my thing. I've really gotten over putting Joe's name next to Tom's. I mean, I just think that I agree with the initial premise. How's he going to finish this thing off?
Well, Matt Ryan's playing the best football of his career right now, right? I mean, having gone to the Super Bowl.
To me, that's a better association.
Sure.
I mean, for obvious reasons. One, they came out together, and that just makes more sense. And that's not just specific to Joe. Anyone with the Tom situation right now, to me, is just unfair to that person and is unrealistic because I just can't figure out what in the world is going on in New England and with Tom, because what he's doing is unreal. But specific to Joe, I think that much like the previous statement about where this team is, I think this is, now he's got to prove doubters wrong again. I mean, his career is interesting in the fact where people didn't really know who he was coming out of Delaware. He proved a lot of people wrong thinking, well, he's just a guy who's managing a great defense. He proved them wrong, obviously, with that run in the Super Bowl. he put up great numbers with Gary Kubiak running the offense. And then things have obviously gone on a slide. Injury is a big part of that. But now this year, kind of indicative of where this team is a chance for Joe to either sort of follow that narrative or prove people wrong again. And that, to me, is interesting.
Evan Washburn joining us here. You can follow him out on Twitter at Evan Washburn. He will be calling the Ravens preseason games along with our partner here, Coach Billick, on behalf of the Living Classrooms Foundation, and Jerry Sandusky over at BAL as far as television as well and simulcasting along. So for you with the Ravens, what are your questions? I mean, play the reporter sideline analyst here in game one. What are you watching for in that Redskin game? What are we watching for the next couple of weeks into training camp?
Well, the two big things for me is the tight end position I find interesting. I mean, the unfortunate situation with Dennis, and that is something that I think anybody who is a fan of football and has gotten to see and know Dennis at all really feels horrible about. But this team's in a really precarious spot with that. Is how is Ben Watson going to be off the Achilles? I mean, that's something from day one at training camp I think I'll keep my eye on. I think it'll be intriguing to see through those games because it's such a valuable position for any team. But I think when we saw Joe at his best, he had that position rolling with Dennis. And even last year, while disappointing at times, Dennis was that safety blanket for Joe. So that, to me, sort of on the negative side, what are they going to do there? And then what could be hopefully positive for this team and for this fan base is this secondary that's kind of been rebuilt via free agency going to be as physical, as dominant, as effective, if you will, as many are sort of pegging it to be. Free agency is a different beast. I mean, Brandon Carr sounds good to us, but he didn't sound good to Dallas. So how does that all work out? Those are probably the two. And then the less sexy would be, as you mentioned off the top, I think, on the offensive line, because like it or not, it all really starts there. And we've seen that the last few years. So that's kind of my pecking order, at least early on, in terms of storylines and intrigue of those first few weeks of training camp in the preseason.
Oh, the Woodhead thing's interesting as far as a weapon in this offense. I mean, everyone I've talked to, around the game, San Diego, and from the outside said, hey, don't sleep on him. I mean, when it's 3rd and 6, you're going to need Danny Woodhead, and Joe Flacco is going to love having him around.
I think that's a great call. He flies under the radar for not just his physical stature, but he's been doubted and exceeded expectations everywhere he's been. And I think the injury that he suffered put him in a spot where people were quick to forget about him. But I think you're exactly right. In an offense where the quarterback likes to, after that initial read isn't there, quickly check it down, which, like it or not, is a big part of Joe's game. That's why the tight end position can be so valuable for this group. Maybe Danny absorbed some of that loss or that hole for this group in that H-back hybrid running back role, because despite, again, his size, he's very physical and durable beyond the obvious serious injuries like an ACL.
A lot of young players to look at around here. As much as we'll scratch our heads about the Ben Watsons and the Joe Flaccos and any of the, even the Eric Weddle, the veteran players, Ladarius Webb playing a role in this team, it really is about the Alex Lewises and the Ronnie Stanleys and the Kamalea Correas and all the draft picks this year and last year and the year before, and trying to figure out, where are my Matt Judons? Where's the next level of starter, the next Zach Orr? Where's that guy coming from on this team?
I think it is, and with this organization, that's always been something we've been able to find, whether we're covering the team or as fans, you latch on to that next guy that comes out of nowhere, and it is exciting. What's interesting is I've looked at it, and you rattled off a lot of the names, at least in the last couple of years, and they've been the lean years here, there's been flashes from a guy like Judon, but the consistency isn't there. Now, Orr provided it, and again, much like Dennis, it's this unfortunate situation that now has taken an odd turn with him trying to come back. But there's been small sample sizes of it, but there hasn't been like the full-bore, go-get-it Bart Scott kind of guy or Jameel McClain. That's not to say it doesn't happen this year. I know a lot of people, whether they be people that cover this team on a daily basis, people in the building, are expecting a lot or hoping for a lot from Correa, so maybe he's that guy who steps in for Orr. Again, all these things are reasons to pay attention and listen to shows like yours every day during training camp. But for me, with Baltimore, there just hasn't been the consistency with that sort of next-level young guy, at least these past couple seasons.
You're running around with lacrosse, golf. You're doing it all out on your Twitter, man. You don't let any grass grow here in the offseason. I mean, there hasn't been a whole lot of football for you to stand on the sidelines and report about the last 9 months. So I know you're chomping at the bit, too. And, look, you're going to be out and around CBS and all these stories and all these AFC teams. There's a lot of homework here. Who are you excited about in the AFC team-wise? Give me a team that you think, well, that's going to be a better team this year.
Look, I'll admit it, and it's partly because I think he's a really good guy, but I find him fascinating. I think he's brilliant. Is Adam Gase down in Miami? I've gotten a chance as best as, and you know, it's difficult to break barriers with these coaches because they are so private about everything. But just the last couple of years, either covering the Dolphins, I went down to Miami last training camp. I'm going to do it again this year because when you get to sit in a room with Adam Gase and see his vision, his humility, what he doesn't know, well, he's willing to admit, and the way he approaches the interaction relationships with his players, Miami's constantly a team that people are thinking, they're going to make that jump this year. They were a playoff team last year, and look, that's all that really matters. I don't think, as we saw in the Pittsburgh game, they were ready for it, but that's the team, at least in the AFC, that I'm probably most interested in seeing what they can do in year two under Gase and what he had to do to completely shift the culture, the attitude around that building after Joe Philbin and all the mess that was the Dolphins for a couple of years there. So that's probably my group. And then secondarily, it would be Buffalo. Tyrod, a guy we know well from his time here. He's a guy I like a lot. I think that whole situation's fascinating and them sort of trying to get rid of him. And now he's back, a new coach.
The Redskins are going to have that too, by the way, trying to get rid of him, and now he's back.
A total shift, but I'll ask you, that to me just doesn't, it really isn't making much sense at all. I mean, if I'm Kirk Cousins, I'm feeling, he could be the first guy, Nestor, that actually heads to free agency completely wide open. And it's Kirk Cousins, I know. It's not necessarily the Tom Brady.
But there will be 10 teams out there. Look, Brock Osweiler got paid last year, bro, right?
I honestly think he could go to free agency and demand a guaranteed contract and be the first one to actually do it and say, I want all years guaranteed. I don't know. That whole situation, I can't wrap my head around.
He is Evan Washburn. We'll be watching his work on preseason football. I'm not making the trip to Miami or New Orleans, even though I like Miami and New Orleans. It's preseason football.
A little hot in August, man.
Bro, I did that until the hurricane almost knocked my ass out in Katrina 10, 12 years ago, whenever it was. I'm off the preseason road beat. I can barely stomach the home games, and they're 6 blocks away, man. But that always important third game with the Bills is here on August 26th. You'll be there. I'll be there, and hopefully we got a good season ahead of us. I know a lot of fans here are excited, especially after the backside of the Orioles debacle here this summer. Gives us a little bit of purple hope. We'll be following you, man. Rest up. You got a lot of football to cover here, pal.
Appreciate it, Nestor. Thanks for having me.
Evan Washburn, our man from CBS Sports, and, of course, from the Ravens pregames now with Jerry Sandusky, as well as our partner, Brian Billick, here on behalf of the Living Classrooms Foundation. We'll get Coach on next week. We're also going to have the Peter Principles around here. If you've been reading the book or seeing little pieces of it, you can hear it in its entirety next week here on the radio. I am releasing chapters 9, 10, and 11. 12 and 13 are already out as the Mass and Dummy series, so we'll be getting that out on the radio as well. Any breaking news from the Orioles, any trades, you're going to get it first on the WNST Tech Service. That is all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. I am Nasty at WNST.net. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live. Everywhere you are, we go with you. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.